Yeah, come on, show me the money.
It's time for the federal budget, or as one person calls it, Christmas for sad losers. And that's from Australia's leading budget economist. Budgets can be a tough sell, but they do matter. Our medicines, our welfare, our submarines, our football stadiums, everything depends on the budget. And there might be a bit of theatrics about budget night, but it's also the one night a year where the government pulls everything together into a single story about how it's running the country. And that means that outside of elections, it's the best chance we get to evaluate their performance. So how are they doing? Well, let's set the scene a little bit. In the last budget, we spent $694 billion. What did we spend it on? Well, the biggest areas are welfare, aged care, pensions, the NDIS, health, education and defence. Where does the money come from? Well, taxes. On our incomes, on companies, on the GST, and also sometimes from debt, borrowed money, which gets paid back in future by taxes. And that is where the budget gets a little tricky and a little interesting. Over time, we are spending more and more. We're living longer, which means we have greater needs for healthcare and aged care. And we have new priorities like the NDIS, climate change, and more spending on defence. And that poses a difficult challenge for the government. Either it needs to find areas to cut back, or it needs to have a difficult conversation about raising taxes. And neither of those things are very popular. So far, the government has taken some steps. It's identified the NDIS and aged care as areas where it thinks it can trim spending, but the details on both are lacking. And on tax, it's moved in the other direction. The main thing that it's done has been to redesign tax cuts. And that's because of the second story on budget night, which is a much more immediate story. We are, of course, in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Prices have been rising abnormally fast for more than 2 years now, and the RBA told us last week that the end may not yet be in sight. And in its first two budgets, the government has tried to step in to help people with the cost of living. We've seen higher welfare, we've seen subsidies for energy and childcare, and now we have tax cuts. But there's a dilemma for the government. The more money you put into people's pockets, the more you run the risk of backfiring and making the inflation problem worse. It's a tricky balancing act, and it's one that will play out again on Tuesday night when the government has flagged further cost of living support. There's a third story on budget night as well, and it's really a bunch of stories rolled into one, because the budget is the best chance that the government gets to update us on the progress of just about every policy area of government, or at least everything that needs money. Here are just a couple of examples. On domestic violence, the government has already promised to roll forward a payment for women fleeing violence, but we're told there's more to come on Tuesday night. On mental health, the government is overdue in its response after it cut 10 Medicare therapy sessions in 2022. We're told there's more to come on Tuesday night. On HECS, the government has reduced the size of loans by changing indexation arrangements, but we're told there's more to come on Tuesday night. On welfare, on the housing crisis, on renewable energy, we are told there's more to come on Tuesday night. And that means there are all sorts of reasons to keep an eye on budget night, even if you're not a sad loser.